How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. I want to talk to you today about something a little bit different. So I usually talk about individual stocks, but today I want to talk to you about the one number you need to know, whether you want to retire at 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. At any age, you can tell, generally, you can make a pretty good guess on when you'll be able to retire based on one specific number. And it's not how much you invest, it's not the market gains that you have. I'll explain what that number is. I want to go through an article, or actually a couple articles, that I read right when I was learning about finance. And it got me so interested in all of finance that it really changed my mindset. It was really a light bulb moment. I would say it's probably the best article I've ever read, and that's from Mr. Money Mustache on this one number that you need to know, and this is your savings rate. So I'll explain how you can kind of determine how long it'll take you to retire, no matter what your salary is. We'll make some assumptions along the way, and we will be able to tell based on what your savings rate is, what your salary is, all this good information when you should be able to retire. And Mr. Money Mustache, his name is actually Pete Adney, but he goes by Mr. Money Mustache on the internet. He actually retired at 30 years old, and he didn't make more than, I want to say 200,000. I think that was towards the upper limit of what he and his wife earned combined in the 8 years that they actually worked. So they both went to college. They did not make a ton of money, and they were able to retire in about 8 years. So I'll go through all of that. If you guys want to help support the channel, because I think this probably won't get as many views as my typical video, because it's on something a little bit different than what I usually talk about. But if you want to support, you can hit the like button. If you want to share it to someone that you know, love, mentor, want to have them hear this, you can definitely do that. You can hit the share button right down below the video. If you want to hit subscribe, that helps a lot too. If you guys want some free stock through WeBull, this is the last one. If you want some free stocks through WeBull and you want to support the channel, you can sign up using the link down below. I don't know how many stocks there'll be by the time that I release this, because I don't know when I'll be releasing this, but if you deposit $100, usually you get anywhere between 2 and 4 free stocks. So again, that helps out the channel a lot too if you want to do that. So let's get into it here. So what I want to talk about is the one number that you need to know for how long it will take you to retire, but it hinges on something that you need to know about first of all. So if you've heard about the Trinity study, that is a study that was done that looked at a number of different years. I believe it was around 70 to 80 years worth of stock market data. And basically they ran scenarios where if you invested, let's say, $1 million in year 1926, if you went 30 years, what would be your likelihood of having that money or having some part of that money after 30 years? And they did that for every single month. They looked at all the different conditions. They went over a 30-year time span. And basically what they found was there's about a 95 to 96% success rate if you withdrew 4% of your money. Now, of course, this is over 30 years, and there's much more variation if you look over longer periods than that. Generally, you would have more money if you went over 40 or 50 years, but what happens is there's also more risk, because there are more years where if there's a large amount of stagnation right when you retired and you were just drawing away from your portfolio, if you had $1 million and maybe it slowly went down, but then you were also withdrawing $40,000 a year, your portfolio would go down more quickly. But it depends on the market conditions a little bit, but what they found was 96% of the time it worked out where you still had money after 30 years. So a lot of people consider this to be a good rule of thumb. So if you take your annual spending and multiply that by 25, that would be the number that you need to retire. Now, that's not all I want to talk about. There's something that is much more important if you're starting off from kind of the beginning to get an idea for how long it would take you to do this. So you can figure out, though, let's say you spend $50,000 a year, or you're going to spend $50,000 a year in retirement. You take that number, multiply it by 25, and then you have $1.25 million. If you spent $60,000, you would multiply this by 25, you'd have $1.5 million. So that is how you figure out how much you would need. I think that that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, a couple things that it doesn't account for First of all, if you have this is just in individual, or this is just in stocks, right? Not talking about bonds at all. So it changes if you have a portion of bonds. Your risk goes down a little bit, but your returns also go down about a good amount. They found that the more stock you have, the better over the long term, because you have that exposure that pays really well, especially right now. Bonds don't really pay much of anything, but this is assuming that expenses don't go up. This is assuming that you have the average market return. This is assuming that you never get Social Security. You never have some big problem that comes up where maybe you need to spend $20,000 extra in a year. This is also assuming you never make $1 more. So I don't know how many people will quit and then never make $1. Most of us, I think, would probably retire from any job that we have, and then in a few years find a job that we like or that we can make some money at, and go about doing that. So that's something that I would consider when you're looking at this. But again, generally people think 4%. Some people say a little bit less, like 3.5% rule or 4.5% rule, something like that. But a lot of people just say, okay, 4% rule works. So what is important from here is looking at how long it would take you to hit that. So your timeline to retiring is based on one simple number. So this is great. You can figure out, how much you need, but how do you know how fast you can get there? Well, Mr. Money Mustache, I should have thrown this out there earlier. This is his website. He was someone that retired at 30 years old. He did not make a huge amount of money. I don't even think he made $200,000 a year between him and his wife. I don't think they made that in any year, but they saved a majority of what they earned, and they made it really simple where they found that, they can determine how long it will take you to retire based on how much you save and how much you invest. So let's say you make $100,000 a year. So this was really a turning point in my thinking. This article, The Shockingly Simple Math Behind Early Retirement, this was something that changed my whole idea around money. Let's say you make $100,000 a year. If you save 50% of your income, you should be able to retire, and I say save, but I'm talking about invest. You should be able to retire just as quickly as someone that makes $1 million a year and spends $500,000 or invests $500,000. Now, this is generally correct, but someone that makes $1 million could scale back their spending a lot easier. But let's say you want to continue that same spending. They save and invest half of what they earn. You save and invest half of what you earn. You should be able to retire at the same time because it's not based on how much you have. It's based on how much you have versus how much you spend. So using that 4% rule, we can kind of get an idea for how soon you should be able to retire. And it just relies on a couple things. First of all, what kind of return can you get? And this is something that I talk about on my channel a lot. I try to pick out stocks that do really well, that can beat the general market. And then how much can you invest each year out of your income? How much are you spending? So if you're spending 0% of your income, you can retire right now because you have no expenses. So if you are able to save 96% of your income, then you only are spending 4% of your income. That would be very significant. You should be able to retire after about a year. What they do is they break this down. So they use the 4% safe withdrawal rate. They assume a 5% investment return after inflation. So probably about 7% return. They're just being a little bit conservative. And they're assuming that you are using a generous amount of safety margin. So again, using that 4% rule. And they broke it down. And this will probably be a light bulb moment for some people. But if you save 5% of your income, it'll take you 66 years to retire. This is assuming that you never get paid anything in retirement. This is assuming that you don't get any Social Security or anything like that. So if you make $100,000 and you invest $5,000 a year and you get 5% returns, you will have to work 66 years. Now, if you save 10%, it's 51 years. If you save 15%, what people generally say you should invest and save, that's generally what financial advisors say. They say it will take 43 years. So that kind of makes sense. If you start working at 22, general retirement age is 65 to 67, it would take you 43 years. Now, a lot of people are able to retire before that because of the fact that maybe they're in a bull market, maybe they get some extra pension, or they're able to sell part of their company, or they're able to make a little bit of income in retirement or Social Security. And there are various ways that people get around this. But if you were working just off your investments, it's going to take you 43 years. Now, if you're able to ramp up your savings, if you're able to save 30%, you would only take 28 years to retire. Now, I'll show you kind of why this is. So we'll break down the numbers here and kind of give an idea for how this all works out. So to make this easy, let's look at the 20% right here. So it says it will take you 37 years. So let's say you make $100,000 a year. You would be saving or investing, starting at $0. You would be investing $20,000 a year. They say that it will take about, 37 years. So we'll put 37 in here. You get 5% a year after inflation, so we'll just put 5% here. You would need, is because we're spending $80,000, you would need $2 million, so 80,000 times 25. It would take you 37 years to get there. Now, you're assuming, again, that rate of return. You're not accounting for taxes, or you're assuming you'll be able to get around taxes. There's some different ways to do that with tax advantage accounts. That's something that some people bring up right away. But it would take you, 37 years to be able to retire on this, and that's saving $20,000 a year. Now, if we're looking at a little bit better interest rate, if you think the S&P 500 will return somewhere between 8 and 10%, let's say it returns 9, after inflation it goes down to 7, it would take you a few less years. It would take you about, I would assume, about 30 years. Yeah, so 31 years would be the date that it would take you, which is obviously a significant amount less than 37. I mean, that is significantly less, especially if you start working at 22 and you're able to save 20% from then on out. And again, this is assuming too you don't get salary increases. That would throw off this too. But let's say you're someone that's starting at 25 years old and you can save, let's say you can save 55% of your income. So you're spending $45,000 a year, you're making $100,000. So with $45,000 a year, you would need about $1.125 million, I believe. Just off the top of my head, you would need about $1.125 million. So you're able to save and invest about $55,000 a year. You're getting about a 5% interest rate. So I know for some people that might seem like a lot, right? That might seem like a ton of money, and it is. $100,000 a year is a good amount of money, but you would be able to retire in 15 years, less than 15 years. So that is where this starts to get a little bit crazy. And as you get down the line, you start to see single digits. So if you're able to save 80%, let's say you can make $200,000 a year and you only spend $40,000. Maybe you're single and you can make that. Maybe you're a doctor. Maybe you're in tech. Maybe you own your own business. If you do this for 5 years, 5.5 years, you can retire. Now, if you're able to beat the market, that's awesome. You will probably be able to retire a lot faster. That's something to consider. Now, this was really a light bulb moment for me. This also makes it really important how you spend your money. So if you are able to, let's say you're saving 75% of your income, and let's say you're making $100,000, so you're spending $25,000 a year, or let's say you're making $200,000, just to make it a little bit more realistic for most people. You're spending $50,000 a year, you're making $200,000. Let's say you could either make $200 or you could save $200, right? You would, at this point, be much better to save the $200 because, first of all, you don't have to get taxed on your savings, right? So if you make $200, you're going to be taxed down to a lesser amount. If you're able to save that $200, not only do you save that in taxes and how much you've spent, stuff like that, but you also need a lower number for your FI number. So you go from 50,000 times 25 to 48,000 or 49,800. Now that might not sound like a lot, but you take that $200 a year, multiply that by 25, you would need significantly less amount of money. So you would need $5,000 less in your FI portfolio, which might not sound like a lot, but let's say you're able to save $5,000 or $4,000. Let's say you're able to save $4,000. Maybe you cut the cord on cable and you reduce your cell phone plan. Maybe you cook food a little bit more in bulk or something like that. You're cutting out $4,000 a year. That would save you about $100,000 in your FI portfolio. You wouldn't need another $100,000 because you spend $4,000 less a year. And not only that, but you would also be saving that $4,000 in the short term up until you retire. And that would all be going towards your investments, which would get you to that goal even faster. So it works on multiple levels. So that is what I wanted to show you. This is really the shockingly simple math behind early retirement that I think a lot of people don't understand. And I realize that my channel is more about stocks and investing, but this is probably more important than any individual video that I could make because it's going to be more impactful to people that haven't heard about it. And hopefully, if you've watched through to the end here, hopefully you got something out of it. I think this is worth sharing with someone that you know, love, or want to mentor because, again, I think putting this in the minds of people that are starting on the investing journey, or maybe haven't thought about it, or maybe are just not considering it now. I think this can shift around your mindset. And for me, I was in a place where I was switching what I wanted to do in my life when I found this. And this put everything into perspective that, okay, I don't have to fall in love with my job because I can move to something else and I'm not necessarily tied to it until I'm 65. Before that, I thought, okay, I need to find the exact right career because I'm going to be in it for a very long time. And nothing really seemed to fit. But with this, it shows you have a lot of freedom if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit in the short term, sacrifice your lifestyle at least. So that is something that I would definitely consider sharing with someone that you know and love and want to show this to. So hopefully this helps. If you guys like this, please leave a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. If you want to help out the channel by subscribing, and if you want to start investing, you can check out the link down below to WeBull. I don't know when you're seeing this, but they typically give away some free shares of stock. If you deposit $100, definitely consider that. It helps out the channel too. And if you want something else, if you want to help out the channel in another way, if you want to know more about my individual stocks, you can check out the link down below to Patreon, where you can join a group of 1,200 other investors. And last thing, if you want to start investing in Bitcoin, there's a link down there to BlockFi. They have other cryptocurrencies too. I have my money in stablecoin there, so it's just a cryptocurrency that's tied to the US dollar, and they pay me 8.6% APY. So you can definitely check that out too below if you want to. Thank you guys. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.